This month, the iconic and groundbreaking television series Sesame Street celebrated its 50th anniversary, and deservedly so, as it's become a major part of many people's childhood, as the show taught us the letters, the numbers, and all sorts of important educational lessons. And to celebrate this important milestone, I'm going to count down my 8 favorite Muppets from the show. I should point out I've not been a regular viewer of Sesame Street for several years, so I'm not as familiar with the newer Muppets that have been added. That's why this list primarily consists of the classic Muppets. However, if you did grow up with newer characters like Abby Cadabby, feel free to shout them out in the comments. In the meantime, here are my picks. The Yip Yips, a pair of Martians who are fascinated by Earth technology. Part of the humor with these creations comes from their genuine curiosity and confusion at the contraptions we use on a daily basis. These creatures are hilarious for 2 principal reasons. One is their designs, as they just have the funniest expressions, and I love the way the puppeteers control their mouths. The other reason is the way they talk, which mostly consists of saying yip and simple words like fan or nope or hello. And when they finally figure out the function of what object they're looking at, their reaction is just as funny. It's almost an interesting commentary on how we view new things. Or maybe it's just the googly eyes. Either way, their sketches provide the needed dosage of humor. Oscar the Grouch. The resident grump, Oscar may seem mean on the outside as he shows his disinterest towards the rest of Sesame Street, but underneath there is a warm side, and Carol Spinney was able to portray that quite nicely. Oscar's personality made him a fun contrast to the other people and Muppets he interacted with. Even with his common demeanor, part of Oscar's strange likability is that he did have the things he loved doing, like residing in his can or collecting whatever others threw away. But I think Spinney is a large reason for the character's appeal too. Spinney always knew the best line readings for Oscar, as he was careful to not make his words too hurtful. It's a tricky character to play, but he figured out how to still make him endearing to children. It was always a treat whenever he popped out of his can and showed off his admiration for what we dismiss as disposable. Oscar even got the honor of opening the first Sesame Street movie, Follow That Bird, with the Grouch anthem. And the second movie, Elmo in Grouchland, even took place in his home of origin. That should tell you what an important part of Sesame Street Oscar is, even if he probably would not want to admit it. Count Von Count. A vampire obsessed with counting, he would often have the responsibility of teaching numbers to the audience. While he was originally a lot more menacing, the Count was eventually toned down and became friendlier. Jerry Nelson performed the character for several years, giving him his signature accent and general excitement of the prospect of counting. Him being a vampire also allowed him to stand out on Sesame Street, and it was always fun whenever the show ventured into his castle. One of the highlights of Count Von Count's time on Sesame Street was his Song of the Count, in which he exclaims how carried away he gets with counting. Sure, the likelihood of him sucking someone's blood was extremely unlikely, but I think the Count has earned his place as one of the world's most famous vampires. Snuffleupagus. One of Big Bird's closest friends, Snuffy became one of Sesame Street's most endearing characters, partly due to his adorable design. There's something very sweet about this woolly mammoth and the friendship he has with Big Bird. Of course, for the longest time, the human characters never saw him and always assumed he was imaginary. They did finally get to meet Snuffy in 1985, mostly because the team at Sesame Workshop learned about the effect adults disbelieving children can have on them. Jerry Nelson was the puppeteer who originally played the role, with Michael Earl Davis and Martin P. Robinson more than doing the job of continuing it on. Snuffy sort of reminds me of Eeyore, and maybe that's another reason he's managed to stick with me as a memorable character. He was certainly an important part of shaping both Big Bird's development and those of the adults on the show. Grover. A Muppet who is always up for adventure and helping others, Grover is one of Frank Oz's classic characters. There's something about the way he greets everything with excitement and optimism, and he makes a good companion for the other residents of Sesame Street. Yes, he can be clumsy a lot of the time, but his intentions are always good. A big part of his persona is the way he would take different jobs, like as a waiter, or a messenger, or a fireman. Sure, he did not last long in those positions, but you can tell he was trying his best to make sure the people he served were content. He also had a superhero alter ego, donning a costume and cape to become Super Grover. If you saw my video naming my favorite Muppets, you can probably guess I have a soft spot for any Muppet played by Frank Oz, and this blue-furred monster is definitely among his funniest. Big Bird. Probably the first Muppet most people think of when they remember Sesame Street and the joy it brought to them. He has a certain innocence to him and a childlike way of thinking, which is appropriate as he's supposed to be 6 years old. He is frequently shown as kind and always attempting to lend a helping hand on Sesame Street. It's clear the respect he has with the other Muppets, as well as frequently open to learning anything. Sesame Workshop and their team of writers have used Big Bird to send some important messages to the audience, most famously when dealing with the death of Mr. Hooper. Carol Spinney especially deserves a lot of the credit for presenting Big Bird as this wonderful soul that any child would want to be friends with. He even got the starring role in Follow That Bird and proved more than able to headline a feature film. Big Bird has certainly earned his place as one of popular culture's most famous and beloved avians. Cookie Monster. One of the funniest characters on Sesame Street, Cookie Monster's love for snacks and biscuits has led to many inspired sketches over the years. Frank Oz found the right voice for him and captured his intense hunger to hilarious results. Seeing him munch on cookies is enough to guarantee a laugh. I should mention I don't like when food is wasted, so the fact that even I find it funny when the cookie crumbs explode in his mouth is a testament to what a good job Oz and his successors have done in performing the character. Around the mid-2000s, Sesame Workshop did make the decision to change his diet and show him trying healthier food. However, they made sure he still eats enough cookies so he can keep his name. Whether he's eating cookies or an apple, Cookie Monster remains a lovable and sweet being, and one we would certainly want to have lunch with, as long as we keep our plates far away, of course. And my favorite Sesame Street Muppet is, or more appropriately, are, Bert and Ernie. Frank Oz and Jim Henson managed to find the perfect dynamic between these two characters, and their odd couple personalities allow for many funny moments. They have such a wonderful chemistry, even though Ernie constantly gets on Bert's nerves with his requests to do something fun. While Ernie certainly has his endearing qualities, one can also somewhat understand Bert's occasional frustrations, especially when he just wants to relax. Ernie's frequent late-night thoughts lend to some funny moments too, as does his fondness for his rubber ducky. Bert and Ernie even took part in the Elmo and Grouch Land movie by occasionally interrupting it to break the fourth wall. Bert and Ernie make for an iconic pair, and I've always enjoyed their presence and company. Now let me know who your favorite Sesame Street Muppets are, and I'll see you next time.